Tonight, I can report to the American people and to the world that the United States has conducted an operation that killed Osama bin Laden, the leader of al-Qaeda, and a terrorist who's responsible for the murder of thousands of innocent men, women, and children.
Never saw that angle before. That's the whitehouse.gov angle. Usually you see the straight-on shot of the president making that announcement. Isn't it amazing how quickly time flies? Welcome back to the Daily Wrap. Tomorrow marks the 4-year anniversary of U.S. Navy SEALs busting into a compound in Pakistan and killing Osama bin Laden. Since his death, which was mostly symbolic, terrorism certainly has not decreased. ISIS, anyone? One of the main tools in fighting terrorists in the Middle East has been the use of drones. Those on the left and libertarians like Rand Paul, well, at least before he announced he was running for president, have been against the use of said drones. But what do Americans think? Well, according to a new AP GFK, don't know what GFK stands for, poll, 60% of Americans approve of the United States using drones to target and kill known terrorists overseas. Only 13% disapprove. So how about party lines? This is a little bit surprising, right? 60% of Democrats and 73% of Republicans approve using drones to kill terrorists. Last week, we saw 2 hostages mistakenly killed, however, during a drone strike in Pakistan while they're being held by al-Qaeda. But they also have done a ton of good taking out ISIS and al-Qaeda leadership. So, Carl, should we see the increased use of drones?
Yes, and the reason being is you send a machine or you send someone's son or daughter. Right. And I've seen too many of my friends come home in boxes from poor management, poor intelligence, and a war that we didn't fight properly to begin with. You send a drone in there, the drone crashes, we lose a few $1 million, but we're given umpteens more than that in welfare benefits, so who cares? I think the use of drones is absolutely crucial in the war on terror, and I think they're used drastically now to cover ground troops, to cover surveillance, to cover everything like that.
I always want to get your thoughts on the irony around the president's use of drones more and more than President Bush did. Right. Yet we always have this political fight on torture. And boy, we can't waterboard anybody because that is inhumane. But killing them from the sky without a judge or jury, that's all okay.
Well, I say waterboard them and kill them with drones. The ones we can't get.
There's a big difference between carrying out the acts of war that we carry out and torturing people. So I'm not sure I would draw that comparison. The reason Democrats go along with it as much as anybody else is what you said.
Small footprint.
It's a small footprint. Look, you know, the downside in the complaints are that civilians are killed, which is terrible. But guess what? Put a guy up there in that plane, and you're still going to sadly have innocent civilians killed. This way we don't lose our guys.
It's a civilian in their country versus a lot of civilians in our movie theaters, our towers,
so
or whatever.
I wouldn't expect the affair we're having with drones to dissipate at all.
Only increase. I agree. Lisa?
I agreed very much with what Carl said in terms of putting boots on the ground and minimizing that loss of life as opposed to using drones. Well, what was also interesting in this poll is the generational difference in terms of acceptance of drones, in that young people under 30, only 45% were in favor, whereas about 60% were in favor. 45% were in favor of drones under 30, and for those older people, 60% were in favor. So the younger people were less likely to be in favor of the use of drones.
2 points I would make quickly. One is, the bad news is that the way that we can go over there and use drones, expect drones to come here. So that's number one. Number two, I just forgot. I feel like Rick Perry.
You stole my you stole my next question.
Oh, what was your next question?
When will drones start to be turned around and used on
it's gonna happen.
us? We've seen drones flying over major cities where there's supposed to be no-fly zones.
Oh, I remember
like that gentleman in Washington, the postal guy about 2 weeks ago, who flew right on to the lawn of
the White House.
Right,
not the White House, the
You
Capitol.
know what? If
the
you want
Capitol.
to fly a drone over my house and watch me sunbathing out by my pool,
Which I've done.
Yeah, who cares?
I'm sure you have. But you know what?
That
Go
was
ahead.
Joe.
I'm not doing anything wrong. If you want to watch me walk down the street with a case of beer, fine. You know,
But it
I
could
really
get a little
do.
nasty
But you know
with
what?
that.
And now, don't mistake this, because I do believe we need boots on the ground right now, and a lot of them.
That was my second point.
Okay, but the use of drones overseas is got to be stepped up.
Consider that had we had boots on the ground in the horrible mistake that took place last week where we lost 2 of our hostages, we would have had a much better chance of that not happening.
Agreed.
We would have had much better intelligence to know that they were in there. So, you know, I'm not much of a war guy, but if you're going to do it right.
Exactly.
So, in terms of drones being flown here by civilians, and again, my point, they're flying over major cities where they're not supposed to be flown. Just from a military perspective, or at least a terrorism perspective, how much firepower can you attach to a small plane and fly it into, say, a stadium?
You can. Well, the drones we have now can carry big missiles, Hellfire missiles on them, and
Right.
which is pretty damaging. You can take out a small house. So.
Right. Let's say ISIS gets a hold of one, and they get a
That's
little
bad.
remote control, and they fly out of a field and fly
Well,
into
they don't
the
even need to
stadium.
have missiles on. They can fly it into a building, and it's going to do something. Some of these drones are huge. They're small. They're small planes. So I think we need to worry about that. But also the level of encryption and security behind them is far surpassed what we think they are.
Sure, sure. That's my biggest concern, is that these things just seem to be flying way too easily. Like we saw with that postal worker just a couple weeks ago, and he was an innocent guy just trying to do a stunt. What happens when and no one stopped him? And that's a big worry. Anyway, coming up next, it is potluck time. This is the Daily Wrap, only on Newsmax.